Welcome, everyone, to the Trusted Advisor Show. My name is Rob Jacoman, and I'm joined today by two of the most amazing co-hosts on the planet. We have Ryan and Devin. How are you guys doing today?
Wow, what an introduction, Rob.
I don't know what to say now. I don't want to mislead people with statements like that, but I will say I did get a haircut, if anyone noticed, and I feel like 10 pounds lighter, which is nice. Um, Not my choice, but I think it looks good, right?
Hey, looking good,
I don't
man.
know.
Not as poofy.
Not as good as Devin, of course, because we all can't be as handsome as he is.
No,
It's just
stop it.
impossible.
Like,
So anyway, we want to segue into, we've got a really important and serious show because we have a serious side to us as well. This is a really important episode this week for a number of reasons because, now we've come full circle. We've had the opportunity to go through the business continuity planning process. And now we've got to the point where you've been executing the plan, you've been implementing some solutions, some processes, some procedures, and you've reverse engineered the process. So now, how do you know if your plan is actually working? How do you know if you're getting results? How do you know if your team is executing and your trusted advisors are helping to execute your plan in the most effective way, strategically, operationally, and from a financial standpoint to the impact to your bottom line? These are all the questions that we're going to answer today, and we're actually going to talk about the last step of this process, which is all about monitoring and testing your plan. So it's almost like a reverse, like a feedback loop. Now that you and your team have put all this hard work into getting this plan in place, identifying the exposures, and really working hard to get to this point, how do you test? And also, how do you pivot when things aren't going in the right direction? How do you then take a different approach or a different direction? And who do you bring in to help you with that process? So those are the things we're going to talk about today. So Ryan, just segueing into that first, just that whole mindset and that whole shift that you kind of have to put on a whole different strategy and approach when you're talking about testing and monitoring your plan. It takes a different perspective. Where do you guys typically start with advising clients on, how to get this particular process set up?
yeah, so it's interesting because we have these conversations kind of in two capacities with all the people that we work with, right? Our business owner clients, we're doing in a business consulting type of relationship where we're talking about the financial planning aspect of things, but we're also talking about business operations going alongside of that, and as well as in the personal financial planning world. One of the things that we communicate to all of our clients is like plans are great, but if you don't implement them, they're really not. I mean, they just are. They end up being a pile of paper that really serve no purpose for you. So when you're going through a process like even like this one, whether it's through a business or when we're talking to clients about even personal financial planning, implementation and testing are probably the two most important pieces of the process. Doing all the background, the strategy, getting all these people involved, it's great. Now we have to figure out what we're going to do when we actually have to use it. It shouldn't be a binder collecting dust on a shelf. So, every municipality, cities, counties, states, federal government have contingencies or disaster plans in place.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have drills, right? We all remember growing up and going to school, you had a fire drill every now and again. You had to
That's
line
right.
up, walk to your spot outside. The same is true in your business, right? We have to have that fire drill every so often to say, okay, does this plan still hold up in the current environment? In the tech heavy world that we live in today, things and systems and processes that you have today may not even be relevant 6 months from now.
Yeah.
So it's probably a really good idea that with all of your key people and all of your key advisors around you that helped you build the plan, you guys should be stress testing it every so often as part of your review process so that you make sure that the plan stands the test of time. And then also, as you replace people, human capital, because you need people to help you implement and test the plan, as those people get shuffled in and out, you need to retest and retrain. consistently. So this is a moving target. This is kind of a cycle that you have to consistently go through. The hard part is figuring out the foundation, and then tweaking the minor details is really where that's the art of making sure that this plan continues to be successful for the life cycle of your business while you're the owner, and even beyond that as well, because this is something that the next level of ownership and management is going to look at too for guidance in trying time.
Yeah. And you know what? There's even like micro strategies or micro plans within the bigger plan as well. Like for example, I'll just chime in here on the safety side. Uh, if one of your objectives to mitigate risk in your business or your organization, let's say you're a construction operation or you're a contractor, one of the things that we typically look at is, listen, do you have a safety committee, right, in place that meets on a monthly basis? And what ends up happening is when you're monitoring that, that's just a micro aspect of the bigger plan. Like that's one of your goals is to have that committee that meets on a regular basis and hashes out safety issues, who discuss risk mitigation and other exposures that may be on the job site. You have this particular project. So at its very core, that is one of your overall objectives as an organization. It's a smaller piece, but as a whole, it does add up. And it's really, really important to keep your people engaged and understand, like, continue to buy into your vision. So that being said, like Devin, one of the things that's so important is having buy-in from your team and keeping them motivated. I see this as one of those issues where, in order to really affect change, real cultural change within an organization, is it has to come from the top down, like almost like a philosophical, visionary approach. How how do you guys typically recommend owners, business owners, C-suite level, how do they communicate that vision and keep the momentum going with executing the plan? Because this is part of the testing and monitoring process. What do you guys typically recommend?
So I think with anything in life, Rob, practice makes perfect. The From the top of the executive team, the owners have to really relay to the rest of the team how important this really is. And God forbid something would happen that would disrupt the daily operations of the business. So constant, whether say we have 10 employees in 3 years now we have 50. So every single year, every time there's new employees, they have to be familiar with the process. Because if you have 10 employees saying 50 in 2 or 3 years, and there's 40 new employees don't even know a continuity plan exists, what's really the point of it? So really just practice, 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 just like anything in life, whether you want to be better at sports, better in business, wherever it is, you got to practice these things nonstop. And to help get the buy-in from the employees is make it fun. Maybe do it and then get, but allow the employees to be engaged in the process. I think not
Yep.
just as a chore. When it's a chore, it's a requirement, they might not be as engaged. So think of different ways to get them engaged, show them the importance of it, and give them some ownership of it.
Yeah.
Whoever is part of it, give an ownership of different teams, saying, here's your part. You control this. You put this together. You're going to help develop this plan. So I think giving ownership to people gives them a sense of importance, and
Yeah.
I think it's critical.
Well, you have to have a culture where you're empowering. This is just my perspective. You have a culture where you're empowering those individuals in your organization, and you're believing in them. You're giving them direction and you're monitoring them. Obviously, that's called good management and leadership. But you're really empowering those individuals because you have communicated from the very beginning. You've communicated a certain vision, a certain direction. And this ties into the business continuity planning, the involving people early in the process in terms of your key employees and your trusted advisors. That's one of the most critical things is constantly keeping the engagement going and meeting on a regular basis. So Ryan, taking a real example, for example, is let's say I have let's say I'm a contractor, right?
Mhm.
And I want to plan for the future. And I'm now gotten to this stage where we've been executing for a few months now, and we're not seeing any results. And I don't even know what those results would be. whether they be financially measurements. How do you put forth these metrics to actually measure this stuff so that you can start to see some outcomes, some
Yeah.
results?
So I think it's important to understand that, and this is really why testing is so important. When you can run through, kind of do a dry run of these scenarios when you're not actually under pressure, you're not under the microscope, I think it takes some of the pressure off of the business and gives you the ability to actually work. So a good example of that is construction is a unique business where if you're in building, contracting, architecture, whatever element of that, in some respects, it really involves you being on site. You have to be somewhere. That's not a virtual job. However, project managers, superintendents, other people, they can do parts of their job from from afar and still be on site occasionally. So, using a situation like a COVID-19, for example, I think prior to this, a good way to stress test it is to try to do, and in the future, maybe trying out cycling, labor teams and things like that for safety measures and figuring out doing a dry run of it on a project that's, you're kind of not under any pressure at this particular point in time and trying to see if that works. If you try it for a week, for example, and it's a disaster and you start to see things getting out of hand, what that does is it gives you an indication that this probably isn't going to work when we really need it to work, and when we're under the crunch. So let's take a step back, let's retool some of these pieces of the process and then try to re-implement that in a future test. And so I think where it's really important, and this takes it back to the culture aspect of it. Let's shift in that same contractor to the administrative staff that are in the office, the accounting team. Part of your culture could be to implement work from home weeks or days throughout the year, where we're going to give people the freedom and flexibility to work from home. And it's a two-pronged approach, because one, you're testing out, can my business still run without people in the office? We know that our labor force is going to have to be on site. You can't build anything without people, there. But the other aspects, the operational piece of our business, can that still continue to function? Can we still bill? So can we still collect on those bills? Can people do that from home effectively? And so culturally, you mentioned top down. I would argue that it's kind of top down with a twist. We're giving people freedom and flexibility. We're kind of delegating to them to say, hey, we want you to have a stake in this. So we're going to let you work from home a couple, weeks a year or whatever it may be, and come up with policies that make sense for your business and your model. But test it out that way, where you can see, are they going to be responsible enough to do it under normal circumstances, so that when we don't have a choice and they're not allowed to be here for whatever reason, that we know they can still be effective. And so that's the challenge. And most people are they're testing plans in a way that they probably didn't anticipate because of what's going on in today's world. So being able to do it under the best of circumstances will give you a better indication of, in the worst possible circumstance, is this actually going to work out in our favor, and is it going to be a positive outcome at the end? Understanding that it's never perfect in any business, but having that, what you guys mentioned, incorporating into the culture, I think is a really, really good idea, because it gives your employees a vote of confidence that you trust them and you trust them to handle their jobs. You put the processes and procedures in place. You trust them to try to implement it. If they come back with feedback, says this doesn't work, I can't work effectively in this way, then you have to change it. And then that way, when push comes to shove and you have to pull out this plan and actually implement it, they're already prepared. They've been doing it already in a normal way. So it's not, out of the ordinary.
Yeah. What's interesting is I've had even mentors and I've learned from so many other people over the years. It's typically not the plan itself that isn't working. It's all in the execution, and it's all in how it's being implemented. And with that being said, when you set out the goals and the metrics and the key performance indicators, whatever it is, however it is that you're measuring against those goals, like you can always measure progress that you're making, or you can always test scenarios. Every once in a while, like you said, when we were growing up, throw in a fire drill in there every once in a while. That's like impromptu. It's just like a surprise. Hey guys, if this happens on site, these are the process. And I'm a big fan of checklists. I'm a big fan of procedures, having very clear procedures that are being followed in a certain scenario, in a certain situation. So shifting gears, now that you kind of laid that out, what happens when things don't go the way you expected? Or, inevitably, we're all in business. We know things don't always go right. We're always talking about positivity and all these great things. But this is one of the things that the elephant in the room is when the ship is off course and it's getting back to you, you're getting that feedback. How do you then right the ship? What procedures do you have in place to make sure that another disaster doesn't happen, or another, like, you don't have another major incident or a situation that is a bad thing for the business? How do you guys monitor and test that?
Rob, I think it all comes down to communication. I think communication is the most important part of this entire process. Because if there's no communication with the rest of the team, it's just the leadership team putting it all together. You got to really think about who's in the trenches every day of a business. A lot of the employees in different departments of every single business are the ones who are doing these operations day in and day out. And if you're not communicating with them, you're not really seeing what might affect the business in certain situations, whether it's a natural disaster, something like COVID-19, a death of an employee, whatever it may be. That communication, and really when you test these plans and send down each department saying, all right, what do you think went wrong here? What went right? How can we fix it? And really getting their feedback. I think it's very important to kind of get that communication line open, and run smoothly, so you can get feedback from everybody to see what went wrong, what went right, and fixing the ship as soon as possible during these tests and trials.
Yep, agreed. And you know what, guys? I don't know if you ever saw this, but Undercover Boss was such a
Mhm.
great show. I don't know
Such
if
a
it's
great
still
show.
running, but listen, it does tie into what we're talking about right now, and that is, as a leader, as an owner, as a business owner, and even if you're in the C-suite level, Devin, you're 100% accurate. That is, communication's the key, and it's so interesting when you watch that show. The end result is that CEO or that president of the company realizing, wait a minute, I'm not at the ground troop level as much as I need to be. Like, I need to be more hands-on, not micromanage, but I need to be more hands-on so that there is an open flow of communication between my employees and, my vision, that because you could be on two different pages with your
Yep.
employees' vision versus what your vision is, and they're not necessarily on the same level. So you're 100% right. Communication is so critical, but also getting feedback, having an open culture where your employees feel like there is an environment having being comfortable with, hey, this is a problem. I've been in situations where I come from an insurance perspective, right? Commercial insurance. Whereas, I've gotten I've basically gotten questions from business owners like, hey, how do I make sure that my guys are reporting claims? Because we have this safety incentive program in place, and, there might be a disincentive to communicate that. So I need to know that stuff. And my contention is, if you create the environment where there's an open dialogue, and there's an open discussion, and there's communication and understanding and empathy, you create an environment where there's no surprises. And that's the whole purpose of putting these plans in place, is in engaging your employees and your trusted advisors in this whole process. So Ryan, that's actually a good segue. Where do the trusted advisors fit in to this whole process? And what do you recommend when, as you're, where do they fit in? It's easy to figure out where they fit in the beginning, but where do they fit in throughout the process in consulting and advising the business owners as this process unfolds over time?
Yeah, so I mean, I always argue that this is the reason why we talk a lot about our board of directors approach and having
Mhm.
everyone at the table. because the reality is that every business is different. The way that they're constructed, the way they do business, the industry that they're in. And so the challenge with that is that we, like, part of this process of testing is also prioritizing things. And so by prioritizing, you don't know who's going to be first in line to have to step in and to kind of plug the leak in the boat. What ends up happening a lot of times with businesses, and it's not necessarily always the owner's fault, but you have one big gaping hole in the hull of, use the boat analogy. You have this hole that's flooding water, and you have all these small pinpricks that are slowly leaking. And what they do is they try to solve as many problems as possible instead of the big glaring one that's in the room. It's like, let me fix these 10 really small holes and let the boat flood and we still sink, as opposed to, what can I do to plug that big hole? I'll get to the other 10 later, because that's not going to prohibit me from getting to the end of the road. That's just going to it's going to slow me down, but it's not going to put me out of business or sink me. And so we have to prioritize, and we all have to work together to figure out where we fall in the totem pole when an issue is in front of us. And it's always going to change, right? I mean, at some point they're going to have some kind of safety issue or insurance claim, and people like you, Rob, are going to have to step up, and you're going to be the primary focus at that point. You're going to be the guy in the front of the crowd. We're still going to be there to help. We're still going to be there to be a resource to those businesses, but we're not going to be the priority you are. And so we all have to kind of stand there collectively as a team and work together. And that's why it's so important to have a group of people that communicate well and kind of play nicely with each other, and understand that it's not, at the end of the day, our job is to advance the position of the owner, our client, the people that we have interest in being successful with. That's the most important piece of this whole process. And so we fit in a lot of different places. And that's why ongoing non-transactional relationships are important with your trusted advisors too. Anyone can sell you insurance. Anyone can implement a 401k. Anyone can do group benefits, as long as they're properly licensed to do all of those. The question is, are they going to be there when you need them, to prioritize, to know when to step up, but also step away when the time is right? And that is, that's less salesmanship and more of the art side of our businesses. And not everyone does that effectively. And so business owners have to be able to audit that. And trust me, when you go through that, you'll know in the moment. You'll know who's going to step up to the plate and who's going to prioritize your success over their own. And it's going to be it's going to be evident to you in that process. And it'll also be in the planning process, I would argue, because people's willingness to really focus on you and what your needs are and what your priorities are, and understand when they're needed and when they're not. Yep. And so that's how we approach that. I know that's how you approach it too. Yep. That's why we take our collaborative approach, so that we can serve them and create this circle and this fortress around a business, so that whenever we're needed, we step in, and then we immediately step right back out. Yep. And that it's a hard thing to do, but it's the most effective way to go about this process, as well as everything else that you're doing as a business owner.
Well, you know what? This all as we're coming full circle here, this all ties into what we hold near and dear in our own businesses, and what we advise clients is, listen, you've got to have performance metrics in place. For as much as it might seem like a pain in the rear, you've got to have a methodology for measuring all these things, to measure performance, measuring the performance of your trusted advisors. How do you measure financial impact of all these different variables in your business, and creating the metrics on the front end to make that happen? It might be a lot of work in the beginning, but we all know once you do the work in the beginning, all this other stuff, now you're monitoring, now you're refining, now you're making tweaks here and tweaks there. Now it's like a constant feedback loop where you're learning from your experience and you're making things better and better over time. And that's really what the objective and the goal is we don't want to just do this just for the sake of doing it, and just to say, hey, all right, we just checked that box, with that check mark off the box, we now have a business continuity plan in place. That's not what we're suggesting at all. What we're suggesting is that you use this as a living, breathing document, to better enhance and improve not only your business, but your culture, the way you handle the financial impact of things, how you manage risk, all these things coming full circle. So, that's really the reason why we want to have all these pieces in place. And again, it doesn't matter the size of your business. This works for a two-person operation, a two-person engineering firm. This works for a 500 individual plant, manufacturing facility. It doesn't matter. It's all the same, but it has to be customized for each unique type of business because every business and situation is different. So that being said, is we're landing the plane here. I think there's been a lot of value created here for everybody. I hope you guys feel that way. If you do, please consider subscribing. Please consider subscribing. We have a YouTube channel. Obviously, we also are on other social media platforms. Press the like button. It really helps us out. And also give us feedback. It helps us figure out what kinds of content that you guys want us to share with you and our knowledge and experience. And, even coming up with unique new topics. We are very, very open to that kind of feedback. So, Devin, any final words of wisdom, or what would be one major takeaway that people could take away from today's episode?
Biggest thing for me is just practice, practice, practice. As your company grows, as you bring on more employees, don't forget about the plan. Continually change it, continually adapt, because there's always going to be new threats to your business at all times. Every single year is going to be something new that could disrupt your business. And just continually just change it, review it, adapt it, practice it continually. Maybe it's every year, the first of every year, maybe it's July of every year, whatever it may be. Put it in your business plan, put it in your schedule, and just practice every single year.
So thanks, Devin. Also, Ryan, what are your, final takeaways and things that you value that you want people to leave with today?
Yeah, so I think the overwhelming theme of this whole process, going through this whole series, one of the things that I think probably the most important thing that I realized is that human capital, the people in your business and around your business, are probably the most important factor, the key factor to success long term.
Yep.
That's with implementing these plans, designing these plans, having the right key people, having the right ownership, having the right culture, having the right trusted advisors. Like that involves at its core, it's all about human capital and people. And so I think that we don't emphasize that enough in our planning and prioritize that enough. And so that's something that, I've taken away from this, something I hope that other businesses take away from this and focus on that and really hone in on that. And I think that if everyone spends the time to really do that and audit their people and make sure that they're well positioned for success moving forward, that I think that, everyone will be in pretty good shape. And I think that as business owners ourselves, we believe in that. We believe heavily in culture. That's why we started what we started. And so hopefully others will take some of those things and some of the other actionable items from this, and they'll take that back to their people. And regardless of what happens in the future, whether it's another COVID-19, we hope not, but any other business interruption, that everyone will be well positioned to do that. And even if someone gets one actionable thing out of this that can advance their position as a business and in our community, that's all that we ask. And that's why we do this. So,
yeah.
And
I
I'll
just,
leave it with that.
I agree with you. I think that all the things that it's not just an event that should trigger, and it's unfortunate in our business, an event or a catastrophic situation initiates sort of this thought process of, wait a minute, we know we need to be prepared. We need to do something. So I think the lesson to be learned here from a risk standpoint from in my world is there's never a perfect time to start this process. So it's advisable just to do it, get started, have at least something, a shell in place that you can work from, a foundation that you can continue to build on from here. And enlist the right people. When you enlist the right people of trusted advisors who know what the heck they're doing, who've been down this road before, and who are consultative in their approach, and they're not just trying to sell you something, or they're not trying to talk over you. They're basically like, let me listen and understand your situation. Let me listen and understand your problems, and let's come up with solutions. Let's come together. Let's partner together, and I think that's really what at the core all of us are all about. So, if anyone
Absolutely.
needs any kind of help or assistance, or you just maybe want some guidance or some advisement in the right direction, like where the heck do I start? Please feel free to reach out to any one of us. So, and I know also that Devin, I know you're working on some free resources that are going to be available to our listeners and viewers of the show that are really, I think, going to help guide them in the right direction, and help you figure out, where do I start? Because that's sometimes the hardest thing is, all right, this is all great stuff. It's very overwhelming. Where do I start?
No, absolutely. So in the show notes, you'll see a link to it's a very easy guide, just step by step, that will show you exactly how to start this process. It sounds very intimidating sometimes. How do I do all this? Where do I go? It's a great guide that was put together. Um, so I think everybody get a lot of value from it.
It's awesome. Well, listen, we are extremely grateful that you took the time out of your day to listen or watch our show. Again, we're always about delivering value. So again, we're going to come up with some, stay tuned, because we've got some really hot topics coming up in the next episodes. And we look forward to seeing all of you very soon. Thanks.